What's the deal with diseases that keep jumping from animals into people? Check this out with our expert from Food and Water Watch. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Zach Corrigan is on the line with us. Zach is the senior attorney with Food and Water Watch. Food and waterwatch.org is the website, of course. And you can tweet him at Corrigan Zach or Food and Water. Zach, welcome back to the program, or welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. I wanted to talk about diseases that jump from animals to humans, given that the coronavirus that is ravaging the world right now killed over 13,000 Americans so far because of Donald Trump's failure to do anything in the first 2 or 3 months. Apparently started with bats and maybe pangolins. These little anteater kind of animals in China. And you know, we've seen other of these diseases. And also, help me with my pronunciation. This is one of those words that I don't think I've ever heard. I've always just read. I always pronounced it in my head, zoonodic, but somebody called yesterday and said it's zoonodic. So anyhow, tell me about this, these diseases.
Certainly, Tom. And I'm not sure if I can help the pronunciation debates. I think it might be tomato, but I can tell you a little bit about zoonotic diseases. That's how I pronounce it. I think that most Americans before this COVID-19 outbreak would have never heard of zoonotic diseases or would not be concerned about them. But in reality, quite simply, they're just animals that are diseases that pass between humans and animals. And it's pretty shocking, I think, for most folks to find out that, according to the CDC, 6 out of 10 known infectious diseases can be spread from animals, and 75% of new or emerging infectious diseases in people come from animals. Tens of thousands of Americans get sick every year from zoonotic diseases. So they're a really serious problem. Obviously, the current pandemic sheds a whole new light on this, but people should be concerned about zoonotic conditions and zoonotic diseases all of the time, not just during times like this.
Now, do those numbers you just quoted include things like E. coli and listeria infections that are specific to the GI tract, or are those all more systemic diseases like, you know, tuberculosis and I believe gonorrhea also started out in animals, or maybe it was syphilis?
It would include both, and we're concerned about those sorts of diseases that you get foodborne. I think people oftentimes make light of problems like foodborne illnesses, saying they have a stomach bug, but it can be quite serious. It can put people out of work for days at a time and can result in hospitalization and death. And that's from things like salmonella or E. coli. But it also includes more serious, I think what people would think of as more serious, like influenza. And a lot of people are now finding out about the 1918 influenza outbreak, but few people actually know that during that outbreak, swine were also, there was an outbreak with swine as well.
Well, that outbreak began in Kansas with a pig farm, didn't it? I mean, didn't it come from pigs and go into humans in Kansas?
That's right, and vice
1917?
versa, too. That's right, and vice versa. And as late as 2009, there was an outbreak. People may remember the H1N1 virus. And that was, they're not quite sure where it originated, but it came from a mixture of swine, avian, and human lineages of the influenza virus that ended up killing 125 people in 69 countries.
Mm-hmm. So what do we do with this information, Zach? I mean, we've known for, I assume, centuries that some diseases come from animals and humans catch them, and then they become transmissible person to person. Clearly the so-called wet markets where wild animals are sold for food And this is not unique to China or Southeast Asia. I've seen these markets in Africa as well as Asia, and I've seen something close to them in South America. They seem to be more markets of poverty, basically. People are resorting to eating, well, I mean, there's parts of America where, they hunt possum and squirrel and even, some people will even eat roadkill. And, I mean, if it's a matter of survival, people will eat whatever's available to them. But how does this inform us with regard to these things? First of all, with regard to wild animals, and then secondly, with regard to domesticated animals that we're using for food.
Yeah, well, certainly. And I think that there is going to be a movement. We've already seen a movement in China to limit these wet markets and limit the contact between people and animals. But I also think there needs to be a transition for folks to realize that this is not something that's just happening elsewhere. This is not just a China problem. This is a problem that happens with our domestic animals, too. And while we are concerned, and obviously so, about the current pandemic, we are currently, Food and Water Watch is working to fight against this administration's current rollbacks of protections that would prevent the spread of disease from animals to swine. And these are
rollbacks like what, rollbacks. Zach? For example.
Sorry, what did... I'm sorry, Tom, what was that?
For example. Rollbacks like what, for example?
Yes, great. So under the new rules finalized just this year, it is now the employees of slaughter plants who are chiefly responsible for identifying diseases in animals prior to and instead of federal inspectors. And this means that under or untrained employees will be the gatekeepers, ensuring that there aren't diseased animals entering the food supplies or just sent to a different farm or sent to a different slaughterhouse where the disease can be spread. And that's very troubling to us.
Amazing. Zach, we just have a minute and a half here. A real quick question. About a decade ago, or maybe longer, there was a lot of concern about folded proteins. These proteins that cause mad cow disease, jumping from cattle to humans, and that may play a role in the explosion of dementia and what's diagnosed as Alzheimer's in America. What's the status of all that?
I think research is still being done on what is the cause, how these prions work and how they affect human health. I think this is more research needs to be done, but we should, if there's anything that we have learned from this pandemic, it's that we should be working with extreme precaution. We should be trying to minimize humans' exposure to animals that are potentially diseased, and we shouldn't be limiting or relaxing such rules.